very excited to welcome everyone today to our continuing videocast series, Thinking Boldly. Today we're very excited to have as our guest Elias Yiannatsis, who is an attorney who's handled a wide range of civil and criminal law cases. He's here with us from Athens. He is a member of the Athens Bar Association and a practicing lawyer in court in Greece. He specializes in family disputes, including domestic violence cases, cross-border disputes, for example, including abduction between parents, child abduction, and cases of same-sex couples. Elias is a graduate of Athens National University and holds a master's degree in private international law and international transactions law. His thesis was on the regulations proposal for the recognition of parenthood between member states under the light of the CJEU's decision of 14/12/2021, the cross-border recognition of same-sex couple families between the member states in the EU. So we truly have an expert here with us today. We're very honored to be able to bring Elias and his wisdom to our Concilium Institute audience. And thank you, Elias, so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. As I've already said, it's very nice to meet you all.
Well, we are absolutely delighted to have you. Just as a little bit of a sort of intro for Concilium Institute audience, we do bring wise advisors to you to learn more about things both nationally and internationally. Elias is our first and honored guest today, being an international guest. And I know that the wisdom he brings today will inform all of us. So without sort of further ado.
Yeah, I think wisdom is a big word for me. I'm still a bit young. I'm trying to get wiser. I'm in the process, so I hope you help me to be wiser. I'm building up knowledge still.
I think part of our sort of thinking is that the more we share, the wiser we all get. So I think it's a growing opportunity for all of us. But I think that certainly you offer a window into a conversation that we don't often get to have. As Americans looking toward Europe, we see that there's a lot of variety, and I would think that manifests in the laws as well as in the social context. So I'd love to hear sort of some of your experience in terms of, particularly, I know recently you had an experience between, I believe it was Germany and Greece on a case. And if you could sort of kick us off just talking a bit about that, that would be wonderful.
Been already said in the introduction, as an attorney, I have a practical experience in LGBT families of Greek people living abroad that were trying to be recognized in the Greek legal order, because maybe this is a concept that it's a bit strange for practitioners from the US to understand and be familiar to. But so to give you a bit of the context in order to understand the dispute, in Europe, family law is not harmonized because we have the European Union. There are some central regulations about, for example, regulating things like jurisdiction on parenthood or on maintenance obligation, hereditary law, inheritance law, but not and in applicable law, and also regulations regarding the applicable law. Which law is applicable when, for example, a Greek person is dying in Italy and he has his estate in Spain, let's say. So we have this kind of complexities, but they cannot intervene in the core of how each country is regulating its internal stuff. So
Sure.
maybe it's a bit similar, like in the US concept with states and. But still, it's more maybe the cultures are very different. So this is what's changing, and in matters of sovereignty of each state that has to be respected. So family law is even more sensitive in this issue. And right now in Europe, it's like being two blocks of, it was like, and it still is like being two blocks of more Western-like states that are in favor of LGBT rights. So this is like really making how to say a dichotomy. This is a Greek word, but I think it's also used in English, like
A dichotomy.
dichotomy. Yeah, right,
Yeah.
a dichotomy. And more states like Hungary, Italy, right now, that are like very conservative. They're trying to minimize the rights of LGBT people into like um, how to say cohabitation agreements, registered partnership agreements, but they don't want to give rights concerning children, so that same-sex couples, for example, cannot have a legally common child, and they're recognizing only the biological parent. So this was the state, the condition, and many Greeks were living abroad, were living in Germany, for example. Um, or in France or in the UK, that okay, it's no longer in European Union, but there were many cases there because there are a big Greek community in the UK that were forming their families either through medically assisted reproduction, either through adoption, and but Greece was refusing the recognition of these familial ties. This means that they were refusing to recognize judicial decisions in most cases that were either giving the consent, for example, to I don't know, to proceed with medical reproduction, maybe surrogacy in some cases of out of European Union, because surrogacy with same-sex couples, it's for gay men, it's not allowed in Europe.
Where in Europe, Elias? Anywhere in Europe?
For gay men, I'm completely positive that it's not allowed in Europe. Surrogacy. It's allowed only in for women, for single women, and for in Greece, for example, and for straight couples, but not for gay men, not for a couple of men,
So
because it's considered that the concept is that surrogacy and medically assisted reproduction is something to how to say, to compensate for a medical default, something that it's missing. This is like the principle. So they're saying that in a couple of men, there is no way that you need a surrogate. You cannot use a
so
surrogate to, because it's not something in biology to how to say, to help or
to
to,
compensate. Okay, so you couldn't have a three-party agreement between the surrogate and two gay men.
no, no.
Wow.
And there was an issue if single men in Greece are allowed to use a surrogate, because single women are when they have
Wow.
fertility problems, but they're dealing as that men, the physiology, the biology of men is something different. So it's actually I think it's based on an idea of maternity, and that each woman needs to be a mother, and they can't understand how a single father or a man would like to have a child or can raise a child. So there is a lot of homophobia for me behind that. But in legal theory, we can find a lot of theories, a lot of arguments. But my sense as a person and as a gay man living in Greece is this, and not only mine. It's the LGBT community's perspective. But I made a bit of a uh, how to,
Analogy?
and no, you say parentheses, like a gap, like I made a
Uh,
gap, so to get back to the question.
uh,
So this kind of Greeks and other people from Europe formed this organization, NELFA, as you said, we pronounce it NELFA, the network of LGBT families in Europe, that were saying that based on the freedom of movement, which is something that European Union can secure because it's in the interest of the community, of the European community, you can't be a parent in one country and not be a parent in another country, because it's not about just entering one country, but it's that and not only for family reunification purposes. It means that for me to come to Greece, you need to, for example, you need to recognize my kids as my own. You need to recognize my spouse, So there was a very big case in the Court of Justice of European Union, Coman, the Coman case that was like, I think it was with Romania, about that she had to Romania had to recognize, the country had to recognize the, how to say, the bond, the legal bond between a same-sex couple, regardless of its own legislation, because otherwise the freedom of movement of the guy, of the person, I don't remember if it was a guy that was coming back to his country of origin, was violated. So, made on this, building on this case, like a precedent, this organization was trying to persuade courts and the government that you need to apply that analogically also to family ties, to children. And so there was a lot of public advocating. We had a lot of meetings with also some people that were close to the prime minister and the team that was because the government in Greece had made how to say, a committee regarding LGBT people. So this was an issue that had been raised, what we're doing with children that already exist abroad and in Greece, and that we have to recognize these children. So these families, some of these families addressed to me, and especially there are two women that are very dear to me, because we also have a more amicable relationship after all this, that were saying, okay, we have to start this, somebody has to go to court. And it was a good case because there were women and they were living in Germany, and their children that they had with a medically assisted reproduction, but the non-biological parent had then to make an adoption in Germany in order for the legal bond to be complete. So it was a good case because both of them and the children had dual citizenship, both German and European, and Greeks, I'm sorry. So they were like, okay, Greece does not allow that, Germany allows that. And they were willing to come back to Greece for to secure for a work opportunity. So the freedom of movement of workers, that is also a very principle, a very hardcore principle in the European Union, was also applicable, because you had somebody who wants to travel for a job opportunity and is factually prevented, because if she comes to Greece, he won't be able to be recognized as a parent for her own children. So we started so we had to recognize as a, in a legal from a legal perspective, we had to ask for the recognition of this German court adoption decision that was saying I'm allowing the adoption to take place in the Greek legal order. So the how to say impediment, if this is the right word, and what was very strong in this kind of cases is the so-called public policy clause, which is also in very many international treaties of international private law. And so it's like Greece in the legislation, and other European countries as well, they have a set of rules that they're saying foreign decisions are recognized under these conditions, and but it does not have to, it must not contradict public policy, which means like it's a abstract notion, meaning the principle, the basic, the core principles of Greek society. So the issue was, is Greek society in its core against this kind of families? And they were saying arguments like schools, for example, the children are going to be stigmatized in school, that adoption has a social perspective as an institution, and we have to secure the best interest of the child. So an LGBT family is not the right place to be, because it can lead to stigma, it can lead to bullying. But the argument, the contra argument was that we don't decide for the future of a child to be born, or that it's in an institution and it has to choose a family. We're deciding for children that already exist and know this family, this particular family. So for the interest of the child in concreto, not in abstract. That was the basic narrative that we're insisting, apart from the legal basis like the New York Convention for the rights of the child, the um, European conventions, freedom of movement, etc. The basic argument was this, and that we don't have to deal with one case with the legislation in total, but with one single case. So we don't. Greece is not asked to change its legislation, saying, for example, that same-sex couples can adopt jointly, but and what was very strong in this kind of cases is the so-called public policy clause, which is also in very many international treaties of international private law. And so it's like Greece in the legislation and other European countries as well, they have a set of rules that they're saying foreign decisions are recognized under these conditions, and but it does not have to, it must not contradict public policy, which means like it's a abstract notion, meaning the principle, the basic, the core principles of Greek society. So the issue was, is Greek society in its core against this kind of families? And they were saying arguments like schools, for example, the children are going to be stigmatized in school, that adoption has a social perspective as an institution, and we have to secure the best interest of the child. So an LGBT family is not the right place to be because it can lead to stigma, it can lead to bullying. But the argument, the contra argument was that we don't decide for the future of a child to be born, or that it's in an institution and it has to choose a family. We're deciding for children that already exist and know this family, this particular family. So for the interest of the child in concreto, not in abstract. That was the basic narrative that we're insisting, apart from the legal basis like the New York Convention for the rights of the child, the European conventions, freedom of movement, etc. The basic argument was this, and that we don't have to deal with one case with the legislation in total, but with one single case. So we don't. Greece is not asked to change its legislation, saying, for example, that same-sex couples can adopt jointly, but it has to say, I recognize this family. So this started a very interesting legal debate and field. We could say we explored a very interesting field legally. In December, I don't remember. I think it was 22. It's actually the decision you mentioned in my thesis. There was a similar case from Bulgaria that went to the Court of Justice, went with a preliminary ruling, saying does Bulgaria has to recognize here and give passport to a child that has two mothers that were living in Spain, or because it can invoke its public policy. And the Court of Justice said that for the purpose of freedom of movement itself, Bulgaria cannot say that it's an issue for me, for my public policy, to recognize the child, because it's just one child. You don't have to change your legislation. You can't say that you're preventing it from discrimination, because this is discrimination, and you have to secure the freedom of movement. So, building on this decision, we were saying that it has to be applied broadly, not just for the sake of freedom of movement, because freedom of movement does not mean just to have a passport, for example, and be able to cross borders. It means that I cross border, but with my family as it is legally. So this was a very strong boost in our case, this decision that we're very much focusing on. And then the other thing that happened, and was actually the article I had written in Careful Child Relocation Project that helped you to notice that you find interesting, is that Greece had a very interesting, I didn't handle it as an attorney, but I used it a lot to write about it and invoke it also in my legal practice. In an international child abduction case, there were two women living, the one I think was Greek, living in the UK, and they had a common child. And the Greek mother, who was not the biological mother, had full custody of the child. She took the child and she came to Greece without the consent of the other parent. So the other parent started an international child abduction case with the Hague 1980 Convention, asking for the return of the child. And the Greek courts had to decide what we're doing, actually. So in this scenario, that they had to protect the Greek mother because Greece is a country with a lot of people abroad, and usually when we deal with the Hague Convention is in these cases with mothers that they don't have a support network in foreign countries and come back to Greece. So this changes a lot how we approach Hague cases, Hague 1980 cases. It's not like the UK that, for example, there are a lot of fathers asking for their children to come back, for example, or it's some there are some practical and financial conditions that are also reflected legally, I think.
Sure.
Anyway, this mother came in Thessaloniki. It's the country in the north of Greece where she was from, with a child. And as you're probably familiar, the Hague Convention says that in order to see if there is an illegal removal of the child, we have to, as an applicable law, we take the country of the previous habitual residence, the jurisdiction that the child flew from.
Yeah.
So the Greek judge was like, okay, like I don't see even the LGBT factor in this case, since we're dealing with the applicable law, and the applicable law of UK gave to the mother the right to come to Greece. I don't care, and I reject the application. And the UK mother was, let's call her UK mother, was trying to say that. This is like against public policy, that it must not, this decision has to be overruled. So this dispute was going on and on. And in the same time, I'm applying for the sake of these two Greek women that are not in a conflictual divorce, that are like jointly and happily living in Germany with their children, to be recognized in Greece. And the first decision, the first instance court decision, it was interesting because you could see that the judge had a hard time, because it said there is no doubt for this court that they have a total normal life, they're totally competent of raising their children. It was even calling her co-mothers, which was like, because I very much insisted that it's not one mother and another one that it's I don't know, something that we don't know. It's two mothers. So we had affidavits saying, for example, the godmother, that from the beginning they were like two mothers, that the children are dealing with them like two mothers. We had affidavits from the grandfather, for example, who had given who was in a little village in an island in Greece and was like, I'm very proud of my grandson because he has my name. So we were like trying to show that this family is not that different. And I was also focusing a bit on the positive side and not on the problems that could be created. Like, what's the problem? That was my that was my approach as an attorney. And so the court said, yeah, I don't have any doubt, they're very good, they're co-mothers, but we're not ready. Greece is not ready for that. So I go to the court of second instance, the appellate court, and I find this case, the case of the international child abduction in Thessaloniki. And I'm like, a reason, a ground, or a legal argument in our appeal was that when we come, let's say, we say in Greek, hand with hand, holding hands together, you say we're against public policy. But here we separate. I'm not the biological mother. I take her to another country, and you say that this is fine. So it's like, and I think we had discussed it in our private discussion that there are many. It's a sociology theory saying that concerning LGBT rights, there is an approach like saying bad times before good times, so that the societies are more willing to give rights in when something bad happens rather than something good, like wanting to have a child, wanting to have a marriage. And it's interesting because in Greece, the public discussion for the cohabitation agreement, which came in either 2015 or 2015, I think, late, started after a public figure, an actor, died, and his long-haired companion didn't have any saying in his funeral. So it was the real bad time when this happened.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is the setting, and the dispute in Thessaloniki goes on because the Greek mother, in order to secure herself, asks for the UK court decision giving her full custody of the child to be recognized in Greece as well, apart from the Hague Convention trial. This was another trial. And at this trial, there was a very brave judge that said that we can't say that this decision is against public policy because Greek society is ready to have this kind of families, and I accept the application. So yeah, I give to this non-biological mother full custody of the child. I think the decision concerned full custody, but this is not the point. So it's like, okay, at that case, they didn't have to recognize the family tie like I had to say in my case that I was trying to recognize the adoption court case, but they had to recognize the result that I'm exercising custody. So my case, in my perspective, was even stronger. And in the appeal court, that now we have a precedent saying that Greece is ready. And what the court said, the Athens Court of Appeal, was that the best interest of the child, it's not something to be judged in abstracto, but so we could recognize this decision if the best interest of the child commanded it, but it has not happened something bad in that case. And they literally said, if there were, for example, if there were a death of the biological mother or a divorce, a separation. So they said that in that case, they're both happy, they're both a family, so what's the problem? They can come together in Greece. And so it was a real paradox. And we also exercised the cassation appeal before it's like the Supreme Court, let's say, in Greece. It's the court of law. It's also only ruling in legal matters, not in the substance matters. And we won't have the chance to discuss it because Greece passed the marriage equality bill in when was it? I think it was last month. Yeah, in February. In the end of February. So it's like a happy ending.
Yeah.
Although still there are a lot of issues, but let's not expand to this right now. So yeah, that was it. So we had the court saying that somebody needs to die for me to have to be recognized as a mother. And a very interesting example what's happening with Italy, because Italy is like the neighbor of Greece. It's like a better version of ourselves, and we were trying to look up where Greeks are looking up to Italy usually. Right now, we're more progressive than them concerning LGBT rights because they have right wing. They have a very right wing president. But in Italy, they have, and I was using a lot of Italian case law as a legal theory. In Italy, they had the same cases of people trying to be recognized, and there were a lot of first instance courts, especially in the north of Italy, like Padova, Milano, saying that we need, based on the best interest of the child, we need to issue certificates naming both parents as both partners as parents of the children, and these were overruled by the new government. But before they were overruled, there was a high court decision saying that okay, yeah, there is the problem, but the legislation needs to change. And in this case, in the case the Supreme Court was ruling, it was also a case of conflict, a case of two mothers where the non-biological one could not have contact with her children because it was not recognized. Because again, as a parallel, it was a bad case. making the judge pay attention to that. So this was a bit the context of the case. It took me a bit longer to explain, but yeah, it's this.
So, Elias, what do you think the next challenges are in this area in the EU generally, or in Greece in particular?
Okay, so right now the EU, and this is where my thesis was in my master, has a proposal for a regulation. Regulation is like, let's say, a law that concerns all European countries about this, like a parenthood certificate. The purpose is to issue for familial ties to be recognized in all countries, and it comes as a, how to say, as a follow-up of many of other regulations that were like, for example, the regulation concerning maintenance obligation, alimony, was saying that the court that is about to, how to say, grant maintenance rights, it won't judge, it won't, how to say, rule uh, on the bond that creates the alimony obligation. Meaning that example, that if a couple is living abroad in Germany and they are, for example, and they have a children, so the children deserves alimony, and this case comes to be ruled in Greece, the Greek judge won't matter, or that in the past he wouldn't recognize, because his subject of the trial would be alimony. So this was like a huge, in Europe. It's not, this is not closed in Europe right now, because what is a family is something, it's a preliminary ruling that comes in force and in application in most regulations, like who has hereditary rights, who has alimony rights. So depending on the law that would be deemed applicable in each case, you could have totally different results. I mean, it's not only a jurisdiction issue. It's about applicable law, and there is nothing saying that LGBT families are recognized. For example, there is nothing saying that if an abduction case would happen in Hungary, Hungarian courts would say that the child has to go back to the non-biological same-sex parent. So Greece, to a bit connect the two discussions, made a good precedence in that I don't care about that if I'm recognizing or I'm not recognizing the familial bond. I care about the result. I care about the best interest. I care about alimony. It was a good precedence. So Greece was very, how to say, progressive now in its legislation regarding the recognition of parenthood abroad. It only gave adoption rights to same-sex couples in Greece, so no rights to medically assisted reproduction still, but it gave the ability for each partner, for example, if they're married, because adoption was is linked with marriage in Greece, even for straight people. If you marry and now you can marry, this is why it was the Marriage Act. You can adopt the child, for example, of your partner, or you can jointly adopt one child together. And this was a huge thing, because this is why Greece didn't have marriage equality right now, until now, because marriage equality would give to same-sex couples the right to adopt without any other legislative change. So it was a very, let's say, hot potato for the government, because it was nothing to change the marriage, but it gave children rights. And there was a lot of public debate, a lot of hate speech, especially from part of the church, because the Orthodox Church, is not separate from the Greek state. They're like linked, not like a fundamentalist state, or they don't have a role in political sayings, but they're in our constitution. They're like very interlinked, the Greek Orthodox Church, and they openly condemned the bill. They try, even now, they're like extra saying that you're out of the Orthodox community, to politicians that voted in favor of the marriage bill. It's ridiculous. It's like a joke. They don't allow them to enter churches. And so to go on. So Greece was like that, and from one day to another married the marriage equality, and also passed a specific article. I think it's Article 11 of the Marriage Act. Let's call it like that. That it says that I recognize every familial that since the familial how to say relationship formed abroad, I recognize it, even if it's, for example, surrogacy or medically assisted reproduction in another way in women. So it's like a totally progressive and open, how to say, private international law rule. And ELFA was very decisive on that, on this particular article in the public debate, because there were a lot of men also doing surrogacy. So it's regardless of how you it says that regardless if Greece allows it or not, I take it the applicable law is of the other country is what I'm recognizing here without any other rules, and it's even more progressive than the proposal of the European Union in this concept, because in European Union they were trying to make some rules of applicable law and just secure that the law that would be applicable would be the one that would recognize both parents. But they were trying to solve it in a more legal, let's say, legally, how to say, legally proper way. In Greece, now they did something like uh, what had happened in the past with political, we call it political weddings, because in the past Greece did not recognize a wedding that was not religious. So in order to recognize many of them that had made this wedding abroad, made something like this kind of provision that it says you're recognized. So Greece right now has this application, but so it's like it creates how to say imbalance, because it's like Greek people able to travel abroad, go to surrogacy clinics abroad, pay this money, and Greek people that are like in Greece, they can't do that, they can't go abroad, they can't live abroad. So it's for them the rights are more limited. So the interesting in the new marriage bill and how it changes the field of family law in Greece is that in a weird way it has created also another inequality between women and men, because same-sex women right now, a same-sex woman can go proceed with medically assisted reproduction. Nobody would check if she's if she has an infertility problem or something, because clinics do it like that. They just take a sperm donor and complete the procedure, let's say. So they can give birth as single women without, of course, biologically having sex with another man or something. They can get that, and then they can marry, because you have to be single in order to do that. You can't be a married or even in a cohabitation agreement with another woman and go through medically assisted reproduction. You have to be single. So the clinics are advising women saying, okay, do this first and then do the registration agreement, or even further, uh, solve dissolve the cohabitation agreement, do this, and then do it again. So it's like, and now this is even more crazy because we have marriage here. So they're beginning to say this has to change. You can't just solve a marriage like that, do the medically assisted reproduction, and then marry
and
again.
remarry again. Yeah.
It's I don't want to say the word, but it's
it's very convoluted.
It's very, yeah. So so this is women, and then they can marry and they can adopt the one child, that it does not have one father, a legal father that would have to give the consent to the adoption. So you have a perfect legal sim, let's say, a legal method to have a common child for same sex, for women, for lesbians, let's say in general. But for gay men, you can do that. So and there were, as I said before, there were some cases when a single man went to ask for the permission to use a surrogate. the permission was granted analogically because the concept was that okay, and it's not a matter of biology because it's in deficiency that you need the other sex to procreate, let's say, and women are in the same situation because they use the sperm, they use genetic material that they don't have, and men need the same plus the uterus, let's say, very cynically. So there were some court decisions saying that this has to be applied analogically, and then they were overruled by a state intervention, actually. And now in a conference with some professors of family law in Greece after the new bill, I heard that there is one case again that granted this permission to single men, but the decision is not published, so I don't have any information. It's just that this again comes to be challenged in courts, in a court level. And the other thing in Greece that it's a how to say, a claim of the LGBT community is that we want for the we call it presumption of fatherhood, if I'm correct, that if a child is born in marriage, that's the guy's child, or in a cohabitation agreement as well. So they're saying that if my for example, I'm a woman with in a partnership, in a civil partnership with another woman, and the one gives birth, why shouldn't I also be recognized, not as a father, of course, but as a parent? So they're asking for this presumption to be analogically expanded. And so there is again a lot of controversy. More conservatives, scholars are saying, no, it's a matter of biology, it's not the same, and blah, blah, blah. Others are saying that maybe this could change. Others are saying that the law has to change again, and that this law is deficient, it's not dealing with the subject completely. And another very interesting thing that the government is not seeing right now is trans people, and especially the so-called that I also want to do an essay about it. Seahorse fatherhood.
Yeah.
What happens with a trans man that is impregnated and gives birth to a child in a cohabitation agreement? We have a same-sex couple again, or not even a same-sex. What happens if it is a straight trans man, if I'm saying it correctly? So in a relationship with another woman. Yeah, in a relationship with another woman. He's the man, he's the straight man, a trans straight man. She's the straight, or I don't know, woman, cis woman, let's say, cisgender woman. And a child is born, but is born from the man. Mm-hmm. So where is biology? Why doesn't the law recognize? So it's not the law; it's how the practitioners of the law approach these things in Greece. And this, I think, all these things are going to build up right now, and they're going to be very interesting, at least legally. It already exists in Europe. So if it exists in Europe, in one European country, in the same way, it will circulate.
Sure.
And what would happen, for example, if the proposal for the recognition of parenthood comes in force, and we have the Swedish certificate of parenthood saying that here, this is the father and this is the mother. Why wouldn't they be granted the same legal treatment in Greece as another straight couple?
Working or looking at creating an article or a piece about the seahorse fatherhood that you just
and trans parenthood in general, because still Greece is very, for example, even if you do the legal process to be legally recognized as your gender, concerning children that you had before, in papers you're still dealt as the dead sex. Wow. I could be, for example, I could be a woman right now, but if I had children with my previous partner, let's say, because it's a very common thing in trans people, in documents, in legal documents, anything, I would be a father for these children with my dead name.
Right.
So this is another thing that is very, but it couldn't. There were demands for it to be solved as well, but the balances in the parliament were already that sensitive that you couldn't even hear it. It's like, and it's important that it was a right-wing government that put this bill in force in Greece. So they had to appease to their more conservative voters.
Right.
So it was very already very for me. I recognize that. I think it was very brave from the government. And I think right now also in Germany they're saying that it's against. I think they're saying it's against the constitution not to recognize this form of parenthood. So it's something that it's gonna come. But I think if we discussed about that in Greece right now, they would be. I don't know.
Yeah.
And be welcome, probably.
Yeah. It wouldn't be well. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
that's fantastic. And we'll really look forward to hearing your progress on your piece about seahorse fatherhood and
Okay. Yeah. If you're
yeah,
interested,
yeah,
as you see, I
absolutely.
can talk and talk and talk.
Incredible.
All right. Well,
You.
Elias, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insight with us. And I'm going to quibble a little bit with what you said at the beginning because I think you are a wise advisor. So thank you for
Thank
being
you. Thank you.
part. Thank you for being part of our Council of Wise Advisors and sharing all of your great experience and knowledge with us. And we look forward to whatever you do next. Please keep us informed.
Continuing the
Okay.
conversation.
It's my
Absolutely.
pleasure. It's my pleasure. It's very interesting to see how you deal with these things because it's sometimes it's like another planet where we're living in our own universe, and then you discuss with professionals, with legal professionals from the world, and they're like, this happens. This. It's good. You get a bit out of the matrix. Let's say sometimes we're in the matrix, so
Right,
it's a good
right.
thing.
It's a parallel universe. It's sort of
Yeah,
science fiction, right? Except it's not.
yeah.
Right.
Amazing.